Maybe it's a classic or maybe a flop. Has Katie seen it? She probably has not. She'll sit down and watch it if it's good or it's bad.
Hey, have you seen this?
No, Katie hasn't seen that.
Hi, I'm Katie, and if I had a nickel for every time someone said to me, "Wait, you haven't seen this movie? Oh my God, you need to see this movie," I'd be very rich. So this is my podcast where I finally watch those movies you all have told me I need to see, and I tell you what I think. Gotta get it out of the way. Spoilers are ahead in the vast void of space, so be prepared. I'm going to talk about the movie Gravity today, and that's why the spoilers are in the vast void of space, because it's a space movie. I am watching Gravity today because I'm a Twitch streamer, and we raised money for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital the month of May 2020, and a wonderful, wonderful community member who goes by the name of Saurus donated and got to unlock a reward where they got to recommend a movie I watched for Katie hasn't seen that. So thank you, NLA, for your wonderful, generous donation for St. Jude, and thank you for recommending Gravity for me to watch. I won't lie, this has been on my list for a very long time because I love space. This is not a secret. Why have I not watched this, though? It's got everything I want, which is space. It's mostly just space in the universe. So I'm actually really excited to watch this. This movie is 7 years old. What is time? At this point, what is time? Because it's literally evaporating through my hands. I guess a few of the things that I know about this movie is that Sandra Bullock is in it. I think George Clooney's in it, though I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that George Clooney is in it. Is it just the two of them in this movie? Is it just like Sandra and George out in the stars, living life? And is it a happy movie, or do bad things happen? Sometimes with space movies, a lot of bad things happen. And while I was looking this up, I feel like bad things happen because I look up the ratings so I can tell you all before I watch the movie. However, this time, all I looked up was Gravity movie. There's a thing under the video section that says Gravity, quote unquote, detached. So I'm thinking there's at least some sort of detachment that happens, but I'm going to try to not look at this page much more just so that I don't spoil more things for myself. I guess there's a detachment. So I'm thinking this is not a feel-good movie. I have always been a big fan of Sandra Bullock. I grew up with her movies, and so I just feel like she always will have a special place in my heart. And now that she is what I think is an astronaut, is she an astronaut? I mean, why else would she be going to space? It astonishes me like that I'm aware of so many movies, but my understanding of what any of them are about is virtually non-existent. For all I know, what this movie is about is that Sandra Bullock is playing a green alien who flies off into space to meet her new stepdad alien, and that's played by George Clooney. I have a feeling that's not what this is about, but, you know, it could be. I guess now is the best time to go see Sandra in the stars, so I'm going to go watch Gravity. But first, it was directed by Alfonso Cuarón. He did a lot of movies. That is one of the most unhelpful ways to explain a director. You know, Alfonso Cuarón, he did a ton of movies. What I mean by that is I have seen a few movies from him, and I actually really like his movies. He did Children of Men, which is fabulous. He did Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. He did a movie called Y Tu, Mama Tambien. And I remember hearing when I was younger that was like, ooh, a little salacious movie. And I think I've seen that one. I can't remember really, but I'm pretty sure I've seen that. He did A Little Princess, and I watched that when I was a kid. And he had some involvement with one of my favorite movies of all time called Pan's Labyrinth. I can't remember what his role was in that, but it is listed as one of his credits. So jumping right into the reviews. This movie, Gravity, has a 7.7 out of 10 on Internet Movie Database, a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, as well as Metacritic. This movie has got some love behind it. So I don't know, a 96%. I mean, the Terminator was 100%, and this one's 96%. Let's see if Rotten Tomatoes knows what's up. Also, 82% of Google users like this movie, and we know what Google users are like. So can we even trust that? I don't actually know, but it's very interesting to see the numbers. I'm going to take off and watch Gravity now, and I will let you all know what I think on the other side. Hopefully I don't detach and have to redock somehow. I'm a little bitter about finding that spoiler, but I'm going to go watch Gravity, see the detachment for myself, and let you know once I return. I have returned, and I'm going to talk about Gravity. This was not a feel-good movie. This was an movie, okay? This movie starts out kind of boring. I won't lie. There's that really, really long scene where George Clooney and Sandra Bullock are coming into the shot on the Explorer, working on the outside of this station. And I'm like, damn, this is like, is this going to be a boring space movie? Oh my God. Oh my God. I really have no other words besides, oh my God. This movie is so misleading when it starts. You're like, oh, it's just kind of like, oh, maybe it's like a discussion film. Maybe it's about bonding with other humans in space because there's no noise from the outside world and no distractions. No, this is a movie about Murphy's Law and about how anything that can go wrong will go wrong. If you do not know what Murphy's Law is, it is an epigram or an adage that is typically stated as anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And this is a fun fact about me. In my family, my grandmother's maiden name was Murphy. And so there's this theory, conspiracy, if you will, that in my family, we have a bit of Murphy's Law that follows us around. And sometimes I kind of feel like it's true, but not like in Gravity. Nothing like in Gravity. First things first, though, the space porn in this movie is beautiful. I love me some space porn. If you don't know what space porn is, it's just literally shots of the Earth or galaxies or the stars, the universe. The movie was stunningly beautiful, but do not be misled by the beautiful space porn because there is horror afoot. This turned from a somewhat boring movie to a horror movie really quick. I would classify this as a horror movie. I don't know if other people feel that way. This felt like a horror movie to me. The opening sequence is just like so quiet and it's literally the calm before the storm. And I want to just point out, George Clooney's character is just literally putzing around in a jetpack around this station while Sandra Bullock is fixing or installing some sort of thing onto their station. And I was a little bit worried for this character. George Clooney plays Matt Kowalski, and he's literally just putzing around without a tether in the vast openness of space with his little jetpack. His little jetpack putzing around, and I literally felt anxiety creeping in. I'm like, what if his jetpack goes awry? That should have been the least of my worries. Essentially, the Russians blew up one of their satellites, and the debris from that explosion tears through this station and literally starts a chain of events that many will not come back from. It tears the space station apart. Sandra Bullock's character, her name is Ryan Stone, Dr. Ryan Stone. And because all of this shrapnel and debris comes flying through their station, she starts spinning out of control away from the station. This movie created so much anxiety in me. Every time you felt like you could get a breather and everything was okay, another bad thing would happen. Spinning forever in space and just dying slowly that way is a huge fear of mine. The chances of that happening to me are very small, but in this movie, it's a very real thing you confront through these characters. The best way I can describe this movie is it's literally anxiety for an hour and a half. I felt like when Sandra Bullock had her oxygen levels lowering, like the breathing was making it hard for me to breathe. And it was really hard to not be riveted by what was happening to these characters and hope that they get out of it. Essentially, it's just George Clooney and Sandra Bullock's character. So after Sandra Bullock's character, Ryan, just starts spinning out of control, somehow she's able to communicate with George Clooney's character, Matt, and he's able to get her and tether themselves together, get back to their station. Casualties everywhere, just literal dead everywhere. And then they have to try to get themselves over to the International Space Station so they can try to get back to Earth. And they're just constantly running out of oxygen, running out of fuel in the jetpack, getting caught on things, desperately trying to grab onto anything that they can in a spacesuit. And there's a part where they get to the International Space Station. It's a disaster, obviously. This movie is so hard to explain because it's just something you need to watch to understand fully. But all these things happen. They're bad things. And she and Matt are spinning out of control. She gets caught on some lines from a parachute and essentially grabs Matt by a tether. But then Matt decides, because she is hooked to this parachute, but she's slipping through it, that he needs to let her go. So he unhooks himself and floats off into space to die. And in a cinematic way, that's very much like oh my God, he's sacrificing himself and he's doing this for her and it's a beautiful thing. But when you really think about it, he just unhooked himself to float off into the void of space with no chance of survival and just to die slowly. And when you really unpack that, it is devastating to think about. And that's just the start of the movie. That's just act 1. And then the rest of the movie is Dr. Stone trying to escape the International Space Station from blowing up, getting caught on things in space, losing fuel in her escape pod, and being unable to communicate with any other station. And then essentially she does get back to Earth after just freaking nightmare scenario after nightmare scenario. Every time you felt like, oh, I could breathe, she's okay, there was another thing that happened and you're just like, oh my God. I felt like I held my breath this entire movie. One thing I'm very curious about is how they filmed this. I know in the old days they used to film underwater to make that kind of floating effect happen. I'm very curious how they filmed this because there was a lot of zero gravity. I kind of feel like I should look into that. All right, I took a beat and I Googled it because we're doing a podcast. I might as well just look it up and tell you so we can all know together. From NBC News, they say for some scenes, the actors were filmed as they swam through their moves underwater. Kind of got that. For others, they were hooked up with a 12-wire suspension system and then filmed with robotic cameras while puppeteers pulled their strings. And then this is kind of an interesting thing because there's moments where Sandra Bullock is scantily clad. Also, how is she supposed to stay warm in space? Is that what it's like when you wear a spacesuit? You wear just your underwear underneath it? Space is freaking cold. So this is a little bonus thing. The harness for the wires had to be made just right to fit under Sandra Bullock's skivvies. Kind of love that they used the word skivvies, but that explains it. So there was a little bit of underwater and then suspension wires. It looks really good. It looks like zero gravity, and I can very much appreciate that from a cinematic and filmmaking perspective. There is a movie that we watched recently called Uncut Gems. I didn't do a Katie hasn't seen that on it. I had heard from several sources, it's the most stressful movie you've ever seen. So I watched it because I'm like, all right, I'm ready for it. The movie is very, 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 very New York. I'm from New York. I was born and raised there. Characters talking over each other and talking louder than they need to be, and just a lot of aggression and things like that. That was the most stressful part of that movie. That people were saying the last 15 minutes of that was one of the most stressful movie-going experiences they've ever had. I disagree. The movie was not that good. Oh God, I hope nobody's offended by that, but I really did not like Uncut Gems. This movie makes Uncut Gems. If people thought that was stressful, they would not be able to handle this movie. This movie was stressful. There is such a feeling of helplessness while you watch this. And when you confront the thought of being alone in a situation in space, it's kind of like the ocean to me. Space and the ocean are very similar, where I feel like maybe we shouldn't explore those places. I know as humans, we can't ever get enough. I want to know what's deep in the ocean. I want to know what's in the vast void of space. But when you think about how harsh these environments are, and as humans, we are not designed to live or survive in them, it's kind of scary to think about how easily it is for us to just, in a blink of an eye, disappear or be taken away because we just can't survive in these environments. And Dr. Stone had to overcome a lot in this just to get back to Earth. And it's just tragic. It's a tragic story. And you're watching it with just this amazement of the beauty that space is. I feel like they did a really good job about going, look at what's around you. This is breathtaking. And it's kind of like the ocean. But when you're in that and you're trying to survive and everything's working against you, it makes you realize that maybe some things are better at a distance, but you just feel helpless. And I can't imagine being in a situation like that. It kind of made me never want to go to space. Not to say that I ever was like, I'm going to space, but this made me really go, you know what, I'm going to maybe make a pro and con list about if space is a good place for me to ever go. I love the fantasy of it, and I love Star Trek: The Next Generation, and honestly, I will watch any sort of space movie that is out there. But how much we just don't know and how much we're still finding out. And then when you watch a movie like this where the odds are not in your favor, it just put a lot of things into perspective for me. I guess all in all, I don't know how to say what I think about this movie. I didn't dislike it, but I can't say that I loved it either. This is one of the first movies where I feel like I'm not sure. This movie definitely struck a chord with me, and I think it will sit with me for a long time. I am glad I watched this. NLA, thank you for making me watch this. It is so different than anything I expected, and it made me appreciate all those people who work hard to keep those exploring space safe and those who are risking their lives to go up and see what's in the great beyond, and all those people on Earth who work to make sure those people are safe. And I think the movie did a great job of making me feel helpless and feel that panic and feel that utter distress of the unknown. And even up until the ending, she gets into the pod, she gets down to Earth. A fire has started inside her pod. So she opens up the door and then water is just pouring in. And I'm like, is she going to drown? Like, I mean, in some ways that would have been very poetic, but like a very depressing poetic ending. But she does end up surviving all of this. And I'm just like, you don't really come back from that and live a normal life. It makes you appreciate things a little bit more. I think if anything, this movie, it tells a story of, wow, my life really isn't too bad. I really should be more appreciative of the fact that I'm not trying to survive a completely horrific situation in space. So if you're looking for an adventure in space, it's not an adventure. If you're looking for a horror movie in space, a realistic horror movie, I recommend watching Gravity. I am going to give it 7 out of 10 panic attacks because this movie was stressful to watch. But I do think that it is worth a watch. Thank you again, NLA, for making me watch this. And thank you to everybody who's been listening to the podcast. A lot of you have been telling me how much you've been enjoying them. And I hope you know it means a lot to me. I'm very grateful that anybody listens to the podcast and that so many of you have had only good things to say about it. And I'm looking forward to making more of these. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day and always make sure you have access to an escape pod in space. That's the one thing I'm going to say. Just always make sure you have that. Take care, and I'll catch you with the next movie. If you want to hang out with me more, or if you just want to yell at me for my thoughts on a specific movie, I stream over on Twitch at www.twitch.tv/KatiePetersPlays. Also, feel free to follow and chat with me on Twitter at PlayKatiePlay and on Instagram at KatiePetersPlays. Music written and performed by Mark Can Do It. Katie Hasn't Seen That is a part of the Geek Generation Network. Until next time, keep your popcorn warm for me.